in Teams and Yammer, sort of a how-to hour-long event. There'll be time at the end for questions, as Dan mentioned. We'll also talk to you about a promotional offer that we're giving you an opportunity to take advantage of for attending this webinar. My name's Ken Cadwell. I'm the Director of Sales here at Directions Training. And for the next couple minutes, the next 45 minutes or so, Dan's going to cover some of the great features of Teams and Yammers and how to take advantage of those technologies. Dan Griffin's one of our instructors. I like to call him industry-leading subject matter expert, but I don't like to build his ego too much. He's already, pretty happy with himself. So he's going to cover all the topics, and then please feel free to either type in questions in the chat box, or at the end he'll open it up, and for any of those of you who have a microphone, you'll be able to ask those questions. So without taking any more time, Dan, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Great, thanks, Ken. Good morning, everybody. Happy webinar day. So we're going to be talking about Teams and Yammer. I also want to talk a little bit about how we used to work in traditional office and what Teams and Yammer mean for how we manage our workday currently. I will also explain to you a little bit about what Teams and Yammer are, and then we're actually going to go into them, and I'll do a little hands-on. Like Ken mentioned, you can type questions in the chat box as we go through the training. So I encourage you to do that. If a question comes up on something I'm presenting, feel free to type the question in the chat box. If you're not sure where it is, I'll type a little message in there so you can see it. Also, I will try to give us time at the end. We got a lot of content that we're packing into a short amount of time here. So if you do have questions, I'll try to make sure that we have a little bit of time at the end for you to ask those questions. So feel free to save them until the end. Last thing about our training environment, at the bottom of the screen, there are a couple little buttons down there. You're going to see like a little hand raise button, thumbs up, thumbs down. The smiley face is a laugh button, and you have an applause button. So you can use those to interact with the class. If you see something you like, hit the thumbs up button. As a matter of fact, everybody just pick one of those buttons and click on it right now so you know what it does. That's it. Play some little notification. I get a little alert letting me know that somebody's clicked on something. Okay. I only saw one person click the thumbs down, so we're already off to a good start. All right, guys, after you click the button, you'll click it one more time, which will deactivate it. So it's kind of like a toggle switch. Once on, and then you click again to turn it back off, so you can turn another one on later. All right, cool, guys. We're going to jump into the presentation now, so I'm going to resume sharing my screen here. So like Ken said, welcome. My name is Daniel Griffin. The company I work for is Directions Training. We're a Microsoft training partner. So let's talk about what the different products are from Microsoft for collaboration. The first one that we have, and the one that we've had for a long time at this point, is called SharePoint. And if you're not familiar with it, I'm going to do a kind of a quick overview just so you at least know what it is. We're going to focus more on Teams and Yammer anyways. So SharePoint is a cloud-based collaboration tool. All the content is stored in the cloud or on the web, so it's stored in websites. It's excellent for storing files and has really great retention tools for files. So a reason why somebody might want to use SharePoint is instead of having files stored on my local computer or stored on like a shared hard drive where other people can access it, if I move it to SharePoint, SharePoint has tools for managing that file like versioning. So if it's available for everybody to edit, instead of it being on a shared drive where someone makes an edit and then saves, that save will overwrite that file and we can never go back. However, in SharePoint, every time you save, it actually creates another version of that same file. So we can roll back further if we need to, if there's mistakes that need to be corrected. So that's a big benefit of it. There's also retention tools for files. If a file has been sitting in SharePoint for, a month, 2 months, 3 months, we can have it send out an alert to all the people who are responsible for that file library and let them know that that file has been sitting for 3 months and hasn't changed, and we can archive it if we need to or refresh it if we need to as well. Libraries can be synced to local computers, so even if I have files stored in the cloud with SharePoint, I can actually connect that library that stores those files directly to my computer so I can access the files like it is on my computer, which is pretty cool. So there's some neat tools in there for that. SharePoint also connects really well with the tool we all use every day, which is Outlook. So in SharePoint, I can create calendars and contact lists and task lists, and with a click of a button, I can connect it to my Outlook. So I do not actually have to go to SharePoint to get to these things. I can just use my Outlook, and all that content from SharePoint is there. And again, the benefit is many people have access to this content. So if I did create a contact list in SharePoint and connect it to my Outlook, I could add a contact in my Outlook, which will actually be adding it to the SharePoint, which will then be going back out to everybody else who has that access to that contact list. Also, SharePoint can be scaled to meet companies' needs. So if you're a small company or an absolutely massive company, SharePoint can work for you, and it can be scaled to meet the needs of that organization. All right, so what's this Yammer thing? It's kind of a goofy name, right? Yammer. Yammer is an enterprise social media tool. We all know what social media is. Social media has been, yeah, Ryan, there is audio, so you should be able to hear it. Thanks, Ken. So Yammer is a social enterprise social media tool. Social media, like the one book about faces. It has a familiar social media interface and interactions that we're used to on social media. The content is organized or separated into groups within Yammer. Groups can either be public or private. So in Yammer, I could have a group for, my exclusive team that we have a place to communicate, and I can make it private so other people can't just jump in and jump out of it. They can't really access any of the content that's in our Yammer group. Joining groups enriches users' newsfeed. So Yammer is segmented into different groups. If you follow groups or follow people, it'll enrich your newsfeed. So again, if you've ever worked with social media, when you first log in, there's a feed of just all sorts of things that you're interested in, people that you've liked or followed, and pages that you liked or followed. It's the exact same thing in Yammer. Groups and individuals can be followed, like I mentioned. It is an excellent place to discover, communicate, and share with everyone in an organization. It's meant to bring fun into the workday and encourage communication, which it really does. And again, we're going to go into a live demo in Yammer. You're going to see it here shortly. All right, so what's this new thing called Teams? Everybody talks about Teams, right? If you're one of the cool kids, you know about Teams. But let me explain to you what Teams is. Teams is another cloud-based collaboration tool and communication tool and social tool. Teams is a place for smaller groups to work together most efficiently. Teams content is separated by channels. So Yammer, all the content is separated by groups. Teams, all the content within a team is separated into a channel. And again, that'll make a whole lot more sense later, guys, when we go into it. Each channel has its own discussion thread, file storage, and more. So here would be like an example of how teams and channels works. Let's say that we all work on a project together, and we work on many projects together. I could create a R projects group, okay? And then within that projects group, we can have a channel for each project that we work on. And each channel belongs to our project group, but is separated into the individual projects. And then within those individual projects channels, we could have the files that belong to that one project. We could have a discussion that belongs to that one project, and so on. So that's how it makes sense for Teams. Now, I know somebody asked the question, so I'm going to take a peek in there. How small are groups for Teams? There's no right answer to that. That really depends on your organization. You might work with 3 people. I work with 2 other people directly. And we have our own team that we work within because we work on multiple projects together. I'll be assigned a project that I'm heading, that I'm doing the majority of the work on, but I might need one of the other people I work with to help me on it. So I can let them know, hey, check out this channel I set up for the project I'm working on. It has all the content, and then this is the things that I need you to do with it. So there's really no right or wrong answer. You could have teams that's the whole company. You could have a team that is all company, that anybody can go in and check out content that belongs to all company, and you also are a part of your project team and your department team and so on. So in Teams, you don't just belong to one team. You'll probably belong to more than one at some point, for sure. But again, more on that when we get into it. It'll make a little bit more sense. Just like groups in Yammer, teams can be public or private. Public teams can be joined or left at will, and private teams require permission to access that content. So again, if I had a project team, I would want it to be private. I wouldn't want anybody in the company just to go in and look at my files and maybe edit them and whatever else. In that case, it makes sense for me to have a private team. So that's just kind of a quick overview of our collaboration tools that we have from Microsoft in Office 365. So I want to do just kind of a little high-level overview of SharePoint, kind of how it's built and what it actually does. And then I'll do the same thing for Yammer and Teams, and then we'll go right into the environments. So SharePoint is websites. I mean, that's really the best way to put it. It's a website that we can go and store files. I can store a list of information. We can have a discussion board or thread. I can have a calendar for the whole company or for my department or whatever else. So SharePoint can seem really kind of overwhelming, especially to new users. It seems like there's just almost unlimited possibilities. But really, SharePoint is not that complicated. It's only made out of 4 things. So I want to give you at least an overview of what those 4 things are. The first thing we've already talked about, which is sites. All the content is stored in a site. So if I want to access the files that belong to my team, I have to go to my team's site or my department site. We also have lists in SharePoint, libraries, and pages. So that's really all SharePoint is. You know, it might seem complicated that there are discussion boards and calendars and task lists and all these other things, but they all belong to one of these things. So we already know what sites are. Sites are the container that hold our lists, our libraries, and our pages that belong to our SharePoint sites. Lists are like Excel spreadsheets. So anything that I have let's say I have a contact list in an Excel spreadsheet and everyone on my department has access to it. Instead of me having it stored on like a network drive where everybody can go to it and add to it and whatever, it might be better for me to put it on SharePoint. Now, I don't even need to put it in SharePoint as an Excel file because it really doesn't make sense in an Excel file. So I can turn it into a SharePoint list, and then everybody can just click, view all the content of the list, add to it, edit it, and everyone has equal access to that one list. It's not stored in some weird, obscure file somewhere. It's just available. Libraries are the file storage in SharePoint. So if I need to store any files in SharePoint, I have to put it in a library. So if you're in SharePoint and you're looking at a list of files, you know you're looking at a library. If there's a button that says upload a file, you're looking at a library. So that is our file storage in SharePoint. And the last thing is pages. Just like our other websites, any other website you've ever been to, it's made up of pages. And pages usually just display information to you. You don't really do much with them other than read them. So those are in SharePoint as well. So the main thing that users interact with are lists, where they add and edit items and view, and libraries, where they add, edit, and view files. So that's it. That's all SharePoint is. Anything in SharePoint can be broken down and put into one of these little things. The last thing about SharePoint is that it's scalable through what's called a site collection hierarchy. So a typical hierarchy would look something like this. There's usually an all-company site that everyone has access to. So as soon as anyone in the company goes to SharePoint, they go right to the all-company that has general information for everyone in the company. That site is usually called a top site because it's at the top of the hierarchy. Off of the top site, we'll have subsites, and the subsites in a typical layout would be broken down into like departments or business units. So I might have a sales site, I might have a marketing site, an operations, an IT site, and that would be more specialized for that individual or those individual people. So if I work in IT, I might not have access to the sales site because that's not really where I need to be working. It doesn't really have files that I need to be working on in. Off of those subsites, we could even break down further and have additional subsites. So if this were my sales site, I might have 2 different sales teams. And I could give them each their own site, which again would be its own collection of content. So every site is its own collection of lists, libraries, and pages. And again, depending on the organization, it can be scaled however it needs to be scaled. And you control access to sites through something called permissions. Our biggest problem with SharePoint is finding the web addresses. Yeah, it's tricky to navigate. You know, if you're not really familiar with how this is laid out, some companies might not have it laid out very well, where it makes it difficult to really understand where you are in SharePoint. And that's one thing that I'm going to show you actually when we get into SharePoint is how to navigate around and how your navigation links should be set up. Ed asked a question about Skype. When we get to Teams, you'll see exactly how Skype and Teams work together because they do work together really well. Perfect, but that's just a quick overview of SharePoint. SharePoint is lists, libraries, and pages. Those are the pieces, and there is usually a collection of sites that store relevant information for those individual groups of people. So how do these things kind of work together? You know, that's really like the main question that we're all probably thinking here. You know, I've got Outlook, I've got this Skype thing that came up, we've got this SharePoint and Yammer and Teams. How do I use all these together? It seems like a lot to kind of consider. So let's first just kind of talk about, you know, how we used to communicate in traditional office environments, in the age of computers. We've had email for a long time, since we had internet, basically. And that's the way that most offices have communicated for the longest time. If I have something I need to say, I write up a little email, and then I send it through my Outlook tool, and it sends the email to all these people. And that's great. That worked well. I'm able to communicate. The drawback with that is the delay it takes sometimes to get a response. One person on one end might reply to me right away, but I might be waiting a day for one of these other people to reply back to me. So there is a little bit of a drawback to email, which I'm sure you all are aware of. Another big drawback and a big problem for the longest time, guys, also pay attention. We blew the budget on these slides, these next couple slides. So, really dial in. This is some movie level animations here. Okay, so sit tight here. All right, so let's get back to files. The biggest problem with Outlook emails, besides the delay it takes for replies, is sending files to people. If I have a file that I've created and I want to share it with the 3 people that I work with, I would take the file, attach it to an email, and then send it to them. The problem is they didn't get access to my file. They all got their own copy of the file. And on a long enough timeline, they might be making their edits and sending it back to me and edits here and there. And on a long enough timeline, nobody knows which one's the current file anymore because it's just a mess. Everybody's got their own copy of the file. So what was created to fix that problem, and again, a lot of people store it on network hard drives, but there's huge drawbacks to network hard drives. That's really not a good way to go. So Microsoft came up with SharePoint. And SharePoint belongs to kind of our post-traditional office here. So SharePoint was our introduction to the cloud. SharePoint allowed us to take this file that I have and upload it to SharePoint. And then when I upload it to SharePoint, instead of me sending everybody a copy of the file, I can then get a link from SharePoint. And yes, I used an ice cream cone for the link because it's so sweet that you could take a link, then put it in your email and send it to everybody. And instead of everybody having a copy of the file now, they have a link to the one file, and SharePoint is our collaboration space where anyone can then open that file, make edits to it, and it's the one file. So that's the big benefit of SharePoint. Okay, and that's really why it was introduced. So we can store a lot of really cool things in SharePoint. SharePoint does have collaboration and communication tools built into it, like discussion threads and so on. But again, we had a little bit of a drawback because we're still talking to people through email. So that's why we had Skype for Business. Skype for Business is our instant messaging application, which allows us to very quickly send a message to somebody and almost immediately get a reply back based on their presence. So if I see that somebody was available in Skype, I could send them a message and I will most likely get a response back right away. It cut down on email traffic because nobody likes looking through thousands of emails. So that was a big benefit of Skype for Business as well. And all 3 of these things work really, really well together. SharePoint has connectors to Outlook. Like I mentioned, I can take a SharePoint calendar and connect it directly to my Outlook and just manage it through Outlook or a contact list or a task list. Skype for Business is connected to our Outlook calendar. So if I have an appointment coming up on my Outlook calendar, Skype for Business will switch my presence based on my calendar. So if I'm available right now and I have a meeting coming up in 10 minutes, as soon as that 10-minute mark hits, it actually switches me to busy in a meeting. So it's really cool. They work really, really well together. So how does Yammer tie into all of this? Yammer is social networking. Let's get that clear, because that's really the most important distinction. People, get access to Yammer, and they're just really not sure what to do with it. I'm at work. I'm not supposed to have fun, am I? So what am I supposed to do with this Yammer tool? It's not intended for file storage. It's not intended for collaboration on files. It's not the place for files to be constantly edited or group edited. That's what SharePoint is for, and that's what Teams is for, which we're going to get to. It's intended for communication. Files can be stored, but they're not really meant to be edited there. So like, for instance, think about an HR Yammer group. I mentioned that Yammer content is broken into groups. I could create an HR Human Resources Yammer group, and I can make it a public group where anyone in the company can go into the HR Yammer group, and I have the employee handbook stored there and benefits information. It's not meant to be edited, but they can click on it and read the content there. They don't have to try to find the HR SharePoint sites and the files and all this other stuff, they can just go right to the Yammer group and click. On top of that, each Yammer group has its own discussion thread. So if I have a human resources question, I could type it right inside of that thread and get a reply from somebody almost immediately because it's visible to a much larger group of people. That's the point of it. So like I mentioned, there is a communication feed on every single group, and again, anyone can answer questions. So let's step back to just using Outlook, just using SharePoint, just using Skype. So let's say Yammer doesn't exist. How do people communicate in that office environment? How do people get into the information? Well, in most cases, one person will talk to one specific group of people, and it'll be limited to that. They don't really talk to anybody else outside the company. So if they have a question, they reach out to somebody they know who might have the answer, and if they don't know, they might reach out to the other people that they communicate with. So this person communicates with that group, this group talks to that person and these two other groups of people, and this group talks to that group, and this one to that one, and this group talks to this one over here. And nobody talks to this guy because, you know, it's that guy. No, I'm just kidding. I guess that group's talked to him. But see how fragmented this is? This is not open communication. We're very limited to getting information. We're not, you know, we're sending it through email. We might be sending it through IM, but we're still not being able to directly ask questions, directly find information, or be self-reliant and find it on our own. I don't want to have to reach out to all these people all the time. I just want to be able to know where to go to find this stuff. So that's the point of Yammer. Yammer is a central meeting place for everyone to be able to just communicate. I got an IT question or an IT problem. Instead of me trying to IM the IT person who doesn't answer me back because they're busy all the time, I can just go to the IT Yammer group and post something, and someone from IT can answer it, or someone else in the organization might have the answer and can answer that for me. Someone else who might have experienced the same problem but not necessarily in IT, be able to answer the question. So that is why we have Yammer. Cool. So in our kind of traditional, post-traditional office here, we use Outlook, SharePoint, Skype for Business, and Yammer. And that really was the standard for quite a bit of time here, up until Teams came out. And we'll talk about what Teams is. Now, is this outdated? No, not at all. This is still an outstanding way to work. This is how the majority of people still operate. You know, most people don't use Teams quite yet. And we'll see what Teams is and what the point of it is right now. So what is the point of Teams? I mean, we're really getting to the important questions here. If Microsoft was, you know, if things were working fine before, why does Microsoft have to come up with all this new stuff all the time? So let's go back to that. Outlook, SharePoint, Skype for Business, Yammer. Again, this works great. A lot of people on the planet are still using this because it just works great. It works well. But there's a drawback here. What's the drawback to this? The drawback right now is that while I have all these tools, the problem is I have all these tools. I have all these different places I need to go to do stuff. And it makes it not really efficient for me to get things done. You know, I might get an email from Outlook saying, hey, Dan, go to the SharePoint and work on that file we were talking about. Or I just uploaded it, take a look. Okay, well, now I've got to switch from Outlook and go to SharePoint. All right, now I'm in SharePoint and I'm looking at the file, but you know what? I have a question about it. So I could either go back to Outlook and ask my question, or I can go to Skype and maybe IM and hopefully get the answer. But again, I'm switching tools here. Or, you know what, if the question could be answered by a broader audience and it's something I can broadcast out there, maybe I'll go to Yammer. Again, the problem is I have all these different tools. So the point of Teams, and I just dropped Yammer out for a second because Yammer really is kind of its own thing. It's social media. It's a place for me to communicate, share ideas, and that's really it. It's not really a place for collaboration. So out of my collaboration tools, again, I still have 3 tools that I need to switch between. That is the point of Teams. Teams is an interconnect between me and these apps. Teams really acts like a dashboard. It's one thing I log into, and when I'm logged into, I can access my Outlook content, I can access my SharePoint content, I can use Skype for Business to chat, I have channels where I can communicate with my small group of people directly without having to start all these separate Skype conversations all the time. That's the point of Teams. So Teams is a very valuable tool. Does it work for everybody? Does it make sense in every situation? No, not necessarily, but it is pretty valuable. So you'll see. But there are some drawbacks, which we'll see right now. So let me switch over and show you around some of these things. Okay, so I'm logged into Office 365 here. And from Office 365, I can access my SharePoint, my Teams, or my Yammer. Okay, so I'm going to start out with SharePoint. Again, SharePoint is a collection of sites. So I just logged into SharePoint, and I'm in the Directions team site. I'm at the top site of the company. Now, this SharePoint happens to be laid out really well. I notice that I have links to the other business units here. So if I click on Sales, when I click Sales, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different because it is a different site. It's its own collection of content. When I click over to Marketing, same thing. I've actually navigated down to one of those subsites. And now I'm going to navigate back up to Directions. So how do I know where I'm at in SharePoint? That's a really good question that I get all the time. The first thing is just look at the top, because these top links, I know it's a really clever name. They're at the top of the page. They're called top links. Somebody, hopefully got a bonus for that. So Directions Training at the top is the site that I'm currently in. Another way to identify is by looking on the left. These links are called quick links. This is the content of the site that I'm currently in. So in Directions Training, these are all the lists and the libraries that belong to Directions Training. When I click over to Sales, you'll notice that the links are different. Again, because I'm in a different place. I have a different collection of content. Same thing with Marketing. So that's one way that you can tell. Try looking at the top to figure out what link you're in, and then on the left, another way to identify is by noticing what content is there. But working with SharePoint content, we're going to do this very quick, guys, and then I'm going to move on to the other things. If I go into a document library, you're going to see how easy this is. You'll already know what to do here. If I want to create a new document, I hit the New button, or a new folder. If I want to upload, I click the Upload button. And I can upload individual files or entire folders, which is great. So if I needed to add a file here, I just say Upload File. I go to where the file is stored, click on it, and it's up. And that's it. If I need to make changes to it, I hover over the file. I can see I can select the file, and then look at all the options I get. So that's it. So this little ribbon at the top will change depending on what you have selected. If nothing's selected, I have options for the library, which is our file storage. If I select it, I've got options for the file. So I can open it in Excel in the web browser. That's a benefit of Office 365. Or I can open it right on my desktop. I can also share the file. Remember I talked about links? I need to get a link to somebody. I'll just say share. I could send an email to people right from here, and it will provide them a link. Or if I just want to copy the link myself, I can just say copy link, copy, and now I can put that in an email and give it to somebody. But again, I can even send the email right from here, which is cool. Download a copy, delete, and so on. And that's really it. I mean, same thing if you're working with a list. So here's an announcement list. You want to add an item, you hit new item, and then you basically just fill out the form and hit save. So SharePoint really at its core is not very complicated. Navigating is one of the trickiest parts, but once you figure that out, working with the content in SharePoint is a piece of cake. So it is still a great option. A lot of companies still use it because it is a very valuable tool. It has some really great options for managing files. Let's check out Yammer now. All right, so I just went back to the Office 365 here and clicked Yammer. So here's Yammer. Here's what Yammer looks like. It looks like social media. I could put a post right at the top. That's the first thing I saw, so that's why I'm talking about it. I could click onto all, and this will show my news feed, so how everybody's interacting with the company right now. So I can see somebody's posted some content, and there's another post here that I could look at. On the left-hand side, I can search all of Yammer if there's something I'm specifically looking for. But what I really want to talk about first is groups. Everyone will automatically belong to the All Company group. So if I click All Company, I'm only viewing the content of the All Company group. So what the heck was I looking at before? Well, if you look at the top, there's a Home button. The Home button shows you your feed. The feed is any new information from any of the groups you belong to or any of the people that you're following. If you go into a group, it's exclusive content that belongs to that one group. All right, so everyone belongs to the All Company. Now, a great way to get going with Yammer. So if you do have access to Yammer, guys, this is what you need to do in order to work with it successfully. People don't seem to understand this because it's not really explained. When you first access Yammer, look around and start following stuff. Because if you're not following stuff, your newsfeed is going to be really boring and really basic, and you're not really going to have a good Yammer experience. So what I want to do is I want to discover the other groups that are out there. I only belong to All Company right now. So I'm going to click on to discover more groups. And when I do that, I can see there's all sorts of different groups for all sorts of different things. You know, there are some for business units, so there is an HR group, there's an operations group and a marketing group, but there's also like cool things like work and life hacks. That's pretty cool. I might want to check that out. So I'm going to first just take a peek at HR, because HR is pretty important. You know, they put benefit information. Okay, and you can see there's some fun interactive stuff here. Hey, everybody, just added the company handbook. Feel free to take a peek. And I've got a link to the company handbook, and I can view the post here. I can also, down at the bottom, like it. I like that, and that just helps gain visibility for this post from this person. Cool, I like that, and then I can add a reply if I want. Hey, thanks for sharing. And you can see I can add in things like an animated GIF or GIF, however you want to pronounce it. It doesn't matter to me. If I click that, I can search for GIFs. So I can just type thank you. A lot of the office stuff in here, obviously, right? So that's kind of fun. Oh, I like this little guy. So I'm going to go ahead and post that. You don't have to use GIFs. Some companies might actually disable GIFs, but it really depends. You can still use emojis and other things. Okay, cool. Again, we're having a little bit of fun and I'm learning information. Now, in the HR group, I haven't joined it, but notice it's a public group, so I'm able to just take a look at it when I want to. If I want to join the group, all that means is that I will have a quick link to it over here, and stuff that gets posted in the HR group will show up in my news feed. That is what that means. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to discover more groups, because it seemed like this group is kind of cool. The work and life hacks. Share cool tips and tricks that help your workday and life run smooth. Okay, cool. Let's check it out. When I click onto that, again, I can see that somebody's posted something about following up on emails, and it seems like this one's getting some traction here. People seem to be kind of interested in it. So I can like that if I think that's pretty cool. I can read through other people's replies. If I think that's cool, I can like that. I really like this. I got to like that for sure. And then I can post my own information if I need to. You know, if I want to. You can also tag or @mention people. So I can say, hey, and then I can start typing a name. You see, I don't even know what other letters I have in here. Here's Elvira, F. Let's see if we got any Fs. So I'm just kind of doing this at will here. There we go. So I can @mention somebody, and then they'll get an alert about it. So I'll go ahead and send that or post that. Cool. So alerts will happen with this little bell right here. If anybody @mentions you, you'll see a little number pop up here. This message button or inbox is not your Outlook email. It's just for private messages sent through Yammer. You'll notice down at the bottom I can create a private message to somebody if I want to. It may not be very useful, especially if you have Skype. That might be a better way to do the private messages. Okay, cool. All right, so that's working with Yammer. I mean, that's essentially it. You know, if you wanted to create a group for any purpose, you could do that at any time. When I hit create group, I can create an internal group for people just inside the company, or external, which allows people outside the company to access it. Now again, this might be locked down in your organization. I'm just showing you out of the box Yammer here. I can put a group name. I can put, off topic. And then I can add people to the group automatically, make it public so anybody can access it. And then when I'm ready, I can create the group. Okay, my group's created. I haven't put any posts in here, but I can add a description or manage my group up top. So all the way at the top, I do have a little gear. If I click the gear, I can add a description. I could say, anything you find interesting that is worth sharing. I can pick a fancy color if I want, and even a little background. Okay, and then again, I can add members if I want, add a group image, but when I'm ready, I'll go ahead and hit save. And there we go. So now my image has been saved, and then I can post something if I want to, right? I can post like a quote or whatever. I mean, whatever this group is for. So it doesn't have to be exclusive work stuff. It doesn't have to be, I go in here for project information and I go in here for IT information or whatever. It's a social media tool, guys. And you already saw that it's pretty fun to use. It's pretty easy to use as well. There's neat things in here. It feels like familiar social media tools. So if you've ever worked with any other social media things before online, you pretty much already know how to get going with this, okay? Posts at the top. You can post to individual groups, or if you want to post to all company, you just make sure you go to the right group for your post. Okay? Cool. Let me check questions here, guys, because I know some came through. Okay, so a couple people are talking about just kind of working. So Leo's talking about Yammer managing all this stuff. Yeah, it's a lot. It can be a lot to manage. I don't think an organization should ever force you to use Yammer, to be perfectly honest with you. If you can devote, maybe 30 minutes a day, maybe after lunch or during lunch, just to kind of poke in Yammer and take a look around, it's pretty useful. But like I said, it shouldn't be a place for important information. It should be a place to go where you can get information that might be important, but not mission critical stuff, right? If it's project stuff, it should be stored in SharePoint or it should be managed in Teams. It should not be done in Yammer because that's not really what Yammer's for. Okay, so that should cut that down. SharePoint would be where your documents are, and that's, again, just kind of how things work. It's a matter of managing your notifications and establishing cultural guidelines. Janet has it, for sure. Cultural guidelines. There has to be a culture set and a standard set for these tools and how they're used, which, again, SharePoint can get out of whack really quickly if it's not managed very well. It can be overcomplicated and over-encumbered with just stuff and make it really difficult. It should really be streamlined. And a big way to manage that is through those document retention policies, because document libraries can just end up being a dumping ground for people in their files, and that's not really what it's for. So yeah. Will Yammer be valid in 2019? Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's a social media tool. Not everybody's going to be using Teams, which I'm going to show you Teams in 2 seconds here. So yeah, Yammer's not really going anywhere. It's not a bad tool. It's a great place just to kind of take it easy for a second. Talk to people in your company. Get to know them. That's what Yammer's for. Again, so I don't think Yammer will be going anywhere. Teams is really siloed when we get into it. It's really meant for small groups of people. So Teams is not really taking over Yammer. SharePoint has a lot of really powerful tools in it. Teams is not actually taking over that either. So there's a lot of misconception about what Teams is. So let's go into Teams right now and just check it out, guys. I mentioned that Teams is a dashboard. Teams brings a lot of these things together in one interface, so you're not having to go to all these things all the time. Is it the ultimate one and only best solution ever? No, because it is limited in some ways. So let's take a look. All right, I'm in Teams now. You'll notice I belong to one team, which is called Directions Training, all company, and it has one channel called General. So again, I mentioned those. You can belong to multiple teams. Teams can have multiple channels. The only channel that's in Directions is General. So once I'm in the team General, that channel, you'll notice at the top, I've got some tabs. Conversations is here, so that's the conversation thread on the page. There is a Files area. If I click on the Files, you can see there's 2 files that belong to this. For anyone who has access to this team can access those files. There is a Wiki library, which a wiki is really just a growing compendium of data. It's an awesome place for people to type up a page or policy on something. So if our policies are changing, rules are changing, fixes are changing, I could write pages and link to other pages. And really, Wiki is broken into different pages. So I have 2 pages here, real basic pages. Within each page are sections. So here's one section. And then I can read the content of the section, add a new section if I want to. And you can see I can add sections all day. It's just adding to that page. And link to other sections and pages just by typing the name of other sections or pages. So they're pretty cool. All right, let's go back to conversations because that's really where I want to start. As a matter of fact, that's not where I want to start. I want to start on the left here just to kind of point out what you got. On the left, in Teams, you have the different parts of Teams you can access. Teams itself is the teams and channels. But down below that, I have something called Meetings. When I click onto that, this is connected to my Outlook calendar, and it will show me my Outlook calendar's data for the day, or tomorrow, or the next day. I can even schedule meetings right here without having to switch to Outlook. So you'll see that inside of the Teams interface, I have access to my Outlook calendar. I can even switch to an agenda view if I want to, which again is not really showing me the timeline, but just a different view. So while you're in Teams, guys, don't be afraid to click these buttons. I'm not going to cover every single little button like that. All right, so that's cool. I have access to my Outlook. Well, what's this Files thing? Files shows me any files that are stored in teams I belong to. So if I belong to 10 teams, when I click onto my team files, it'll show every file regardless of what team it's in. So these 2 just happen to be to the one team that I belong to. But I'll show you. I'll create a new team. I'll add a file to it, and you'll see I'm able to access all the files regardless of what team it's in right from here. OneDrive access is also connected. Again, I don't have to switch to this OneDrive app to get to my files. I click OneDrive and I have access to all the files stored in my personal OneDrive. So OneDrive is personal. Chat up at the top is Skype for Business, guys. Skype for Business is built right in here. So I can start a private, notice the little Skype logo, private Skype conversation with any of these people. Let me see who I got here. Elvira. So let's see where she's at. Oh, I don't see Elvira. Okay, well I can search for her at the top. I can just start a new conversation. So I just click the new conversation button. I'll type the name of the person I'm looking for. Here's Elvira. And now I'm going to have a conversation with her using the Skype tool. However, it's in the Teams interface, so I actually have a lot of really cool tools here. It's not Skype, but it's Skype and Teams controls built in. So in my private conversation with Elvira, I could store files that belong to just me and her and whatever else. Okay, so I can have all the content added in there. And I can see she's typing a message down at the bottom. Cool. All right, all the way at the top is activity. Activity is just alerts. Okay, so I can see Elvira added me to a team, and it's showing me the team. If somebody mentions me, then it'll show up there as well. If I get any instant messages coming in, it'll show up there at the top. That's all activity is. It's just alerts. So let's go back to Teams here. I know questions are coming through here, guys. I'm going to try to get to them as best I can in just a minute, okay? But I want to wrap this up because we are kind of limited on time here. Finish up what I need to show you with Teams, and then I'll answer all your questions. So in this Teams channel, there's general, there's files, and all this other stuff. So what I want to do is just create a team and just show you what that's like. So all the way down at the bottom, you'll see I have an option to join or create a team. If I click join or create a team, I can actually search for other teams that might be out there or create a team. Now I know someone else in the company created an ad hoc projects team, so I'm going to go ahead and just search the word add, and you see I'm able to find the ad hoc projects team, and I can join that team. Okay, because it's a public team. That team has one channel called General. Okay, cool. All right, while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and create my own team. I'm going to call it Dan's Project or Projects Team. Oops, members. Thank God for spell check. Let's do capital B. Possessive. All right. And then privacy. Is this going to be a private group, or do you want it to be public where anybody can jump in and click around and access files and all this other stuff? In this case, I'm going to go with private for this one. And I'm going to click next. Now, since it's private, the next screen will allow me to bring people into this. So I can start typing names of people that I'd like to join this. And I'm going to go ahead and click add. Perfect. And they're going to get an alert that they're a member of this team. You can actually give them different rights if you want. So there are two different levels of permissions. Members are people who can access and edit and upload. Owners are people who can add channels and delete content and add things and all this other stuff. So I'll just make both members and I'll hit close at the bottom. Okay, cool. All right, so now I've got the projects team right here ready to go. It's got a general channel, which is just kind of our basic stuff, but I want to add a channel. So you'll notice there's 3 dots. 3 dots always means more, right? If I click the 3 dots, I can follow the channel, which I already belong to, so I'm already following it. I can open in SharePoint. What the heck does that mean? We're going to come back to that in a second. Add a channel, add members, connect to other content, get an email address for the group. So let me go ahead and create a new channel first. I'm going to call this ABC Company Project or Project. And then I'm going to go ahead and click add. Cool. So now we got the ABC Project channel. So now anyone who's working on the ABC project can come in here and be a part of our conversation where we're talking about the project. Any files that belong to this project, I can go to Files and I can upload now. And you notice when I click Files, New, Upload, Get Links, add a link to another cloud storage like Google Storage. I mean, you're not limited, Dropbox. You're not limited to just Microsoft products here. I could connect anything. Maybe there's people outside the company who are using the Google storage. I can add a link to that and I can upload and manage files through the Teams interface. You guys should be getting it now that Teams is an interface. It connects all these things together. That's the point. But let me go ahead and upload a file. It's going to upload, takes a couple seconds. It will take me into the file so I can review it, or I can edit it if I want to. Actually, it didn't do it. If I were to click on it, it would take me into it. Okay, cool. And then if I wanted to, I could click edit, and I can edit in Excel on my computer or edit in the web browser. I can even start a conversation about this one file. But I'm going to go ahead and close out of it. Perfect. So that's under files at the top. I can manage and add to the wiki, which we already briefly talked about. But here's the best thing, this little plus button. Plus, you can add any of these other links at the top for your team to access content. So I just uploaded an Excel spreadsheet. This is really important to our team. I'm concerned that the people who work on the project with me are not going to remember to click files and not going to remember to click here. As a matter of fact, I just want to make it super, super easy. So I'm going to click the plus button, and I'm going to give them an Excel button, and I want it to open up the regional sales file when they click on it. And I'll call this tab regional sales file, and I'll click save. Perfect, and there it is. And when they click on it, it'll open up the Excel workbook for them to take a look at, and if they want to edit, they click edit. That is awesome. And not only that, it did post to the channel for me, which is great. So click regional sales file. There it is. Perfect. Let's click the plus button. What about our SharePoint? I don't want to go all the way over to SharePoint. It's so far away. Well, just click the SharePoint button and add SharePoint so your team can quickly access your SharePoint. That's the point of Teams, guys. It brings all this other crazy stuff together into one interface for you to really easy and effectively work on that content. Now, I mentioned that when I go back to files here, guys, the Microsoft Teams is going to show me every single file regardless of what team it's in. It might take an extra second because I just uploaded the Excel file, but the Excel file should also be visible here because it's in my Microsoft Teams. Let me just hit the refresh. Yeah, there it is. It's right there. I just had a refresh. Because it's web-based, we got to refresh things all the time. Not that big of a deal. All right, let me take a quick peek to see if there's any questions that are relevant to what we're talking about right now, and then I will open it up to a little Q&A here in just a second. A lot of just kind of side conversation. Uses the SharePoint backend, but it looks much nicer. Yeah, so SharePoint really is, or Teams is using SharePoint for file storage. So when a team is created, guys, when I created the team, when I created the channel, this file link is actually a SharePoint library somewhere hidden in the background. Because to store files online, the easiest place to store them is inside of SharePoint. Also, just so you guys know, if you use OneDrive, you're actually using a private SharePoint library. So it's all kind of SharePoint, in the background, which is cool. Is that a copy of the Excel file? So the file did get uploaded, so it is available now in the cloud. I still have the original on my computer. But now that I've uploaded it, I should go to my computer and delete that one because it should be managed in the cloud now. That's the whole point of it. You definitely want to work off of the uploaded one. That's kind of the point of it. What happens to user data when they leave the company, Teams, channels, and so on that they created? So if I were a global administrator, I would just revoke their license and remove them. And what would happen is their team site would not necessarily go like derelict out there. It would depend if other people belong to that. It would depend if they were the only administrator. So if I wanted to delete a team, I would have to either be the administrator or have another administrator. But it wouldn't affect anything. It would literally just pull the user, essentially. And a global administrator can always administrate, so it's not that big a deal. Can you rename the site? Rename like a SharePoint site? Or are you talking about your Teams here, or what are we talking about here? Where does email come into play? That's right, I did kind of glaze over that real quick. So if I close out of this here, ABC Project Company, okay? We're working with a lot of people outside. We're working with another company called ABC. So what I could do here is I could click the, so it's under the three dots. I always tend to forget. Click the three dots and I can say get email address, and I can get an email address for our project. It's kind of a long random one. I could maybe edit it a little bit, but what will basically happen is I could provide this to all the people at ABC Company so that they're not emailing all the members on my end. They're emailing the project. Okay, well, we've got to do an update for the project. Make sure you send it to this because then everyone on the team gets that email. That's all it is. So it's actually pretty useful. It's essentially an Office 365 group is what it is when you create have members in a channel. Let's see if there's anything else there under the three dots we're talking about. Connectors is just connecting to other content. Follow the channel is if you belong to it, you're automatically following it. Open in SharePoint will just show you the SharePoint libraries that were built on the back end that are kind of hidden here. We know what get email address is, and we know if we wanted to get a link to the channel to share with somebody, we could do that. All right, guys, we have a little bit of time here. I mean, that's really the main things I wanted to show you. So I do want you to type any questions that you have. Just go ahead and fire them out into the chat box here. I do have one or two more slides at the end here, but I want to just take a minute for Q&A.
So Dan, if you were to leave the company and they wanted to rename that team site and then give ownership to someone else after you've left, that's all possible?
Yeah, that's all entirely possible. The team's never going to go away if it has membership. The team actually has to be deleted through the Office 365 admin. I have to go in and find the team and delete it. So even if I delete someone who owned the group, if there were other members, they're not going to lose access or anything. It's just going to pull that person. And then there might not be a sitting or standing administrator at that point. So people might have to reach out to get something changed or added. In which case, the global administrator would just assign somebody the administrator right for that channel or that team.
Janet's got a good comment. Make sure there are multiple owners.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a bad practice. And if I wanted to do that, so if I'm the administrator here, I could just manage the access and edit the channel. So if I click Edit Channel, I think this is, no, that's not where it is. I have to edit the membership. Connectors, email, get to link. Sometimes it doesn't pop up right away. Manage team, and then here's all the people that belong to the team. I just change their, it's not a bad idea to have two owners. And that's it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Again, to do that, I went to the team at the top, click the three dots for the team, not for the individual channel. And then I have the ability to manage the team, and that's where I have the members, channels, and again, I can add channels here if I want to, settings for the team. So again, this is all stuff you can go through on your own, and app access.
John had a question, and it's an interesting one. So eventually, could this take over as your primary interface? You come into Teams, and that's what you interact with, or are you still going to interface with the other applications within Office 365 separately?
Yeah, at this point in time, it's not designed to replace anything. So the answer is no. Is that eventually what's going to happen? I imagine that, yeah, in the future, there's going to be everything just kind of linked together. And just managed this way. Yeah, I imagine it would be all through an interface like this. Like they will probably have an email button where you can just click and read your emails. That does make the most sense. But there's nothing in place right now for that to actually happen from Microsoft. And not anything in the next 5 years that's outward facing that I know about. Teams work the same on Mac and PC. It actually does. Absolutely. And also, one other thing here, you want an even faster, more collaborative experience. Instead of doing Teams through a web browser, I can actually download a standalone application. And it just runs a little bit more efficiently on the computer. And same thing with on the Mac. And I'm a Mac user. Office 365, the current version of Office 365, is finally identical on the Mac and on the PC. I'm so thankful for that because that used to drive me crazy. With like the 2011 version on the Mac, it looked nothing like it did on the Windows machine. There will be a recording available from my understanding, yes. So that's a good question. Jeff just asked, will Skype stay separate in the future or will it be merged into Teams? So Skype in Teams is actually kind of its own separate entity from your Skype login. Although you can use Skype on either side to communicate with people. You can use it through the Teams interface or you could use it through the traditional standalone Skype. It is already integrated into Teams. So you don't have to have both open is what I'm saying. So if you're someone who uses Teams and you're logged into Teams all day, you can just have Skype access available in that. You don't have to have the separate standalone Skype. So I imagine they're always going to stay separate because Teams is not the solution for everybody on the planet. Not everyone's rolling out Teams. I work with a lot of law firms. I don't know if you guys belong to a law firm, but a lot of them have just upgraded to Office 2007. I'm not even joking. Like it takes a long time for some companies to move forward. So Microsoft is not going to do something that drastic where, all right, everybody's just using Teams now, we're going to throw out all this other stuff and your traditional access to it. That's not going to happen. All right, guys, a lot of really good questions. I really do appreciate it. But I would like to switch back over to my presentation and hand it back over to Ken to kind of wrap up here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, everybody, for your great questions, your participation. One of the things that we wanted to do was to make an offer to you, those who have attended, and provide a complimentary lunch and learn very similar to this for your organization. It's a 1-hour virtual session for up to 100 employees. You can choose the topic within Office 365, any of those applications. For that hour, we'll discuss and cover any topic that's important to you. You choose the date, and we'll create a virtual environment such as this and provide a great learning experience. Either Dan will do it, or we'll have one of our other great instructors provide that information. It's really a great way to either get some specific questions or topics covered. We will definitely send this offer out to everyone, John. You can be sure of that, but I appreciate the question. Absolutely. And we'll provide the link to the recording there as well. I think it's a great way to either we can talk about the differences between applications, we can cover why you might do something versus another way. We can talk about specific topics within, whether maybe it's Excel or Word. So really, any of those applications within Office 365, you choose the topic. As long as it fits in that hour, we'll be happy to come to your organization virtually and provide you a great session. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that. We'll do that as well, Jeff. We'll provide a link to the presentation as well. We'll put together the PowerPoint, the video, and provide you the connections to that. I was just reading my Ace marketer was reaching out to me, telling me how it's going to work out for us. So if you have a desire, and we hope you do, I hope you take advantage of this offer. You can either contact your account executive if you know who that person is, and hopefully you do. And if you don't, please email us at sales@directionstraining.com. We'll find the appropriate account executive, and they'll reach out with you, and we'll put this together for you. And hopefully have an opportunity to come talk to some of your employees and provide some training for you at no charge. So just want to again thank everyone for taking the time out of the day. We know you're busy. We appreciate you. Hopefully you found some value in this, and we look forward to talking to all of you in the future. If you do have any questions about anything at all, you can use that same sales@directionstraining.com, and we'll get you the answer you need. So everyone have a fantastic rest of the week, and thank you very much.
Thanks again, everybody. Take care.